Over a century ago, in the year 1906, about 40 years after the end of the Civil War, Secretary of War William Taft authorized the construction of a Civil War monument that would ultimately be completed and unveiled in the Arlington National Cemetery in 1914. And there it would stand for 110 years without causing any trouble. Far from it. In fact, the monument was revered and beloved, so much so that for decades, every U.S. president, Republican and Democrat, would send a wreath to be laid at the site. Even Barack Obama participated in that tradition. Now, before I tell you more about this memorial, including what it's called, let's fast forward to the current day. For 110 years, the memorial was honored by many Americans. To most, it was probably unknown. It sat there, harming no one, creating no problems of any kind, until right now. Over a century after the monument's construction, over a century and a half after the Civil War was fought, it has been decided all of a sudden that the memorial must come down. In fact, it so urgently must come down that we're told it's worth desecrating the hundreds of graves surrounding it in order to get rid of the thing. Fox News reports, quote, despite efforts from a group of Republican lawmakers, a Confederate statue in the Arlington National Cemetery will be removed in the coming days. The Confederate statue is part of the push to remove military installations named after the Confederacy in the wake of the summer 2020 Black Lives Matter protests. According to a press release from the National Cemetery, the statue will be removed from the cemetery by December 22nd. The move to remove the statue is in compliance with the congressional mandate to remove all Confederate memorials by January 1st, 2024. The congressional mandate, passed in 2020, declared that the Department of Defense must remove all names, symbols, displays, monuments, and paraphernalia that honor or commemorate the Confederate States of America by January 1st, 2024. An Arlington National Cemetery spokesperson confirmed to Fox News Digital that safety fencing has been installed around the Confederate memorial as preparations begin to deconstruct the memorial, which was erected in 1914. So, as part of the moral panic over the death of a criminal drug addict in 2020, this monument will be torn down. It's being done at the behest of the so-called Naming Commission, which was formed according to the wishes of Elizabeth Warren, with the purpose of renaming or destroying all monuments or statues with ties to the Confederacy. And now is probably the best time to tell you the name of the statue, and it is not the Confederate statue, because it's not a statue meant to honor the Confederacy. In fact, it is called the Reconciliation Monument. It is literally a monument to reconciliation. It was designed to symbolize national unity in the wake of the Civil War. And that's not my interpretation of it, okay? This is the express, explicit purpose of the monument. It was commissioned specifically for this reason, as a sign that the country had moved on from the conflict, a sign that we were all countrymen again, a sign of reconciliation, hence the name. So we must ask, if the monument symbolized reconciliation, then what does its destruction symbolize? Now, don't worry, you may feel disgusted and infuriated by this systematic campaign of desecration, this crusade to destroy our history by destroying some of our most beautiful and cherished works of art. You may find it repulsive and insane. You may wish that everyone involved would be arrested and thrown in prison, which is what they deserve. And I may share all those feelings with you, but fear not. As the vice chair of the Naming Commission explained in a local news interview, they simply know better than you. And you should trust their judgment instead of your own. Watch.
And if there's one thing that commemorates the Confederacy more than just about anything we've seen, it's this monument.
Retired Brigadier General Ty Sigely, the vice chair of the Naming Commission, says the message the monument conveys is clear. Among the symbols, two figures of enslaved people and a Latin quote that translates to, "The victorious cause was pleasing to the gods, but the lost cause to Cato."
And in a way, it's saying that they were right, that the Confederates were right, and the United States is wrong.
In 2020, Congress authorized the commission to review Confederate assets on military bases. Sigely says people should trust the bipartisan nature of the commission.
So we have Republicans, Democrats, former military, defense intellectuals. We're a very diverse group in every way you would think that Americans are diverse, and yet we came together to do this mission.
There are plenty who oppose the recommendation, including Diane Brills, who was visiting from Florida.
All history should be recognized, and it should not be removed.
But Sigely has a message for them.
They're still going to teach the Battle of Chancellorsville at West Point, and Lee is still going to win every year. But this is about commemoration, about our values.
Yes, you see a very diverse group. Establishment Republicans, establishment Democrats, former military, defense intellectuals. It is a varied mix of totally indistinguishable left-wing elitist bureaucrats. It's a diverse group that consists of swamp creatures, other types of swamp creatures, plus some other swamp creatures, and then to mix it up, additional swamp creatures. And this collection of soulless hobgoblins have simply decided that this beautiful, historically significant memorial is no longer consistent with our values. And by our, he means his. He has the moral values of a reptile, and commemorating all of those who died 150 years ago in the bloodiest war in our nation's history does not comport with his reptilian values. And so the memorial must come down. This Christmas season, don't let the government be the Grinch of your savings. Right now, you can diversify your savings into physical, precious metals while stockpiling free silver in your home safe. Don't miss out on Birch Gold Group's most popular special of the year. Now through December 22nd, for every $5,000 you spend with Birch Gold, they'll send you a 1-ounce silver eagle coin for free. Text Walsh to 989898 to claim your eligibility now. You can purchase gold and silver and have it shipped directly to your home, or have Birch Gold's precious metal specialists help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold for no money out of pocket. And they'll send you free silver for every $5,000 you purchase. Keep it for yourself, or give something with real value as a stocking stuffer this year. Just text the keyword Walsh to 989898 to claim your eligibility with an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of happy customers. Now is the best time to buy gold from Birch Gold. Text Walsh to 989898 and claim your eligibility for free silver on qualifying purchases before December 22nd. That's Walsh to 989898. The new StopBox Pro is the leader in rapid access firearm security that does not use batteries or electronics. If you're on the fence about getting one, you can now get one for free. The StopBox Pro is the latest evolution in secure handgun storage. It's proudly made right here in the USA, building on the trusted foundation of the original StopBox. The Pro is larger, more robust, and even more versatile. But the real genius of the StopBox Pro lies in its patented hand gesture code lock. Security doesn't mean inconvenience. That's the principle behind the StopBox Pro. It's sleek, portable, discreet, ensuring your firearm is safely stowed, yet always within reach, whether you're at home or on the go. StopBox Pro is offering a buy one, get one free deal on their new StopBox Pro. On top of that, if you use discount code Matt at checkout, you get an additional 10% off. So head on over to StopBoxUSA.com right now, or click the link below and ensure your firearms are secure and accessible when it matters most. That's StopBoxUSA.com for their incredible discount of buy one, get one with an additional 10% off with code Matt. Now, it's worth noting one minor detail here, which is this is against the law. They do not have the legal authority to tear a monument out of the cemetery just because they don't personally like it. This violates both federal law and the legislative mandate that Congress gave itself when it formed the Naming Commission in 2020 in the first place. You know, despite how it may seem, these people don't actually have the legal authority to just do whatever the hell they want, as long as they can cloak it in the guise of racial equity. There are laws in this country, allegedly, and they are once again being thrown to the side with little fanfare and almost no protest. But somehow the blatant lawlessness is not the most outrageous thing here. It's hard to say what the most outrageous thing is, as the whole thing is utterly repugnant and infuriating. This is indeed a war on our history. It's also a war on other things. It's a war on beauty, for one. Aside from the historical significance of all the monuments that they're tearing down, these are also artistic masterpieces. You know, I don't know who coined this term, but I've heard these statue topplers described as aesthetic terrorists, and there couldn't be a better description. They are indeed terrorists waging a jihad against beauty. But it is also a war on history. The people conducting this war, they're not honest about it, because they aren't honest about anything. But their agenda could not be more clear. They say that, you know, they aren't erasing history because you can still read about the history in books. But what they don't tell you is that, first of all, they're also in the process of rewriting the books. As you've heard on this show, publishing companies have hired sensitivity readers to actually change the content and language of books in order to make them more sensitive. So yes, you can read about the Battle of Chancellorsville in books until you can't anymore. But second, even if they left the books alone, history is not supposed to be contained only in books. The whole point of having historic monuments and statues and artwork, the whole reason why every civilization in history has produced these things and revered them, is that it helps people stay connected to their history in a way that simply reading about it can't. These are physical reminders of where we came from and who got us to this point? Why do you think ancient societies without any modern technology spent decades painstakingly building giant monuments to their own historical heroes? Because they realized that you need to stay connected to your past and be reminded of it and have a spirit of humility and gratitude in the face of it. It is that spirit that our elites want to extinguish. They want to create a society full of people who live in a historical vacuum, severed from their past, detached from their future, lingering in a kind of nihilistic limbo where neither history nor legacy matter. That's the goal. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing, though, because at the same time, somewhat paradoxically, the people who seek to sever us from our history also want us to remain stuck in it. Now, they don't want us to honor our history or commemorate it or memorialize it or learn from it, or least of all, understand it. But they do want us to retain historical resentment and guilt. Okay? That is the one part of our history that they wish to keep intact. That's how we've ended up in this bizarre situation where people today, in the waning days of the year 2023, somehow act as though the wounds of the Civil War are fresher for them than they were for people who lived 100 years ago. Back then, people were ready to be reconciled. They had put the resentment to the side. They were capable of seeing the dignity and heroism of men who fought on both sides. They nearly universally respected both Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, these were people who had living relatives who fought in the war. These were people who lost family members at Antietam and Gettysburg. These were people who had actual, literal, physical wounds from the Civil War. And yet, they were somehow able to recognize the dignity and courage of the men who died on either side. And they wanted to be unified as a country again. So, they were much more connected to the Civil War, and yet a lot less upset about it in a certain way. So how is it that we, a century later, have apparently more resentment and more anger stemming from the event that the people who lived through the event didn't even have? Our parents didn't fight in this war. Our grandparents didn't fight in it. Our grandparents' parents didn't fight in it. And yet it's our generation that is apparently still so upset that we can't stand to see Robert E. Lee's name on a building. And we can't stand to know that there are Confederate graves at Arlington. Our grandparents didn't feel that way, but we do. How does that make any sense? Well, it doesn't make sense. It's total nonsense. But it's all part of the agenda. It's not an accident. It's a situation that our elites have intentionally set up. They have successfully created a society filled with people who know nothing of their history, do not honor it, do not remember it, don't know anything about it, and yet still hang on to its anger and its hatreds and its resentments. People, who couldn't even tell you who was president in 1961, and yet who at the same time act like they are deeply hurt by things that happened in 1861. People who could not tell you what happened 40 years ago, and yet who act wounded by things that happened 400 years ago. People detached from all aspects of the past except for its grudges, which they cling to desperately. That's the kind of country the elites wanted to create, and they have. And of course, in such a country, we cannot have anything called the Reconciliation Monument, because reconciliation is the very last thing that they want. And that's why it was taken down. And it's why those statue topplers are, once again, with a vengeance, canceled. Hey, YouTube, thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like access to my full show with no ads, you should go to dailywire.com and use promo code Walsh to get 2 months free on all annual plans. See you there.